And good afternoon, Charles Moscowitz here. Thanks for joining me. This is my first attempt here at doing a live daily broadcast, which my intention is to do Monday through Friday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time to 1 o'clock. I can see that I sent out a bunch of invitations, have gotten no response, so it looks like it's just going to be me, yours truly, Charles Moscowitz, doing a little intro as I begin to build the program. Now, I already see that I'm having a couple of technical difficulties here. I seem to be up, and I mean, this, I agree, it shows how incompetent I can be with technology here, but I'm already up on Zoom, assumedly recording. And I also am up on the OBS system, which allows me to stream to about 6 or 7 different platforms, which is really interesting to me. But I'm having a little problem with the visuals on Zoom going to OBS in terms of getting the video into the OBS system so that you can see the entire screen, not just a close-up of me, which I don't want. So we can get people calling in and being seen and being heard. And that's my goal. I think after I do this broadcast today, I'm going to get with a technical expert that I know to see if I can tinker with the technology so that by tomorrow, the show goes up as planned. The idea for me is to go live, as I mentioned, Monday through Friday, 12 noon to 1 or longer, take calls, invite callers, build an online experience, a community where people can participate, not just video-wise, but also if they want to call in. I'm going to be giving out a phone number, a call-in number. Let me mention it right now in case you're listening. This is it's actually done through Skype, so it's separate from Zoom. That number is 339-244-3665. 339-244-3665. 339-244-3665 is the number if you'd like to join. And if you're out there and you'd like to participate, come on down. Do it by phone, do it by Zoom. The show, it's amazing what you can do now with technology as I'm learning. Again, my goal is to go via Zoom live Monday through Friday, 12 to 1 p.m. or longer if the conversation is cooking along. To have guests, to do commentary. I have a bunch of guests lined up this week. I did not schedule them so that they would be going during the live segment because I'm not confident enough yet in my abilities there. So I have them joining me separately on the regular Skype or Zoom interview that I then download into YouTube. The show is live on a bunch of platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, Twitch, Twitter, JK, and a couple of others, DLive. And then it downloads into an audio show, which is then heard on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Stitcher, among others. And all this happens. It's amazing what someone can do now with freedom of technology. All this happens pretty much simultaneously. The audio goes up a little bit later. I haven't figured that one out yet. I'm hoping to get a means by which that can be live, and I'm sure I will. And it all happens in real time. You know, you could call in, comment what's on your mind. In a way, I mean, I've done talk radio in different settings in the past at radio stations, mostly in Greater Boston, where I am. And since I've been out of that, now this is my attempt to, I don't know, I guess you might say resurrect it by doing, there's my Yeti mic. I'm putting it up there just as a prop because, to be honest with you, it's not plugged in. I'm trying to, I had to unplug it because I was getting echo. In fact, that's one of the things I want to talk about with my expert later today. See if we can actually make that happen again to improve the sound quality. Anyway, so I guess my question to all of you is, how are you all holding up with the pandemic, of course, and then in addition, we see in the news the rioting because of that horrible murder in Minneapolis, which was very strange and very terrible. I'm going to give a few reflections on that. My first thought on that is that it reminds me of problems that were part of the movie Serpico. I don't know if you remember Serpico from back in the 70s with Al Pacino, and it was about this corrupt New York City Police Department, and Serpico was an honest cop who went in and he tried to simply conduct himself according to his vision of being a good cop. And he came across all this corruption and secretiveness at very high levels and tried to take it on. He ended up, being shot and finally left the country. But in the process, he exposed a level of corruption which ended up causing reform. And I think that this is possibly a problem that might be part of the Minneapolis system, where you had this cop who was obviously a bad cop, at least from what we can tell. Having had already killed someone and been involved in many really questionable activity, that he's still out there. Still, they're all covering up from. There's a code of omerta. It gets to, I suppose, a question about police patrolmen's associations, and maybe they have a somewhat of a Masonic nature. They're secretive. They take an oath of secrecy, I think. Again, I don't know a lot about this. This is a suspicion. At this point, I'll be looking into it further, however. But, when you have a secret society that is part of the Association of Police and a code of secrecy which tends to protect bad cops, then you're going to have problems like this. You're going to have trouble where somebody's going to engage in egregious behavior, and certainly racist behavior, likely. And I think that is the case in this case, and not be held accountable because of this code of omerta, this agenda of keeping things secret and giving police a pass. It's because it's just strange to me that this would continue to happen when everyone knows, and every major city knows, and every major mayor knows that police have to be very careful about excessive force and about applying that excessive force, particularly to minorities, because of what can happen, because of the fact that someone can be unduly affected, and that racism does play a role in it. Police maybe are more frightened, particularly of black men, who because that does fit the profile of someone who may commit more crime. Now, that's saying that I would contend is not racist. I think it's just a fact. I would point out I read years ago a mafia book about who was it, Bonanno, or up in Chicago. I forget his name now, but he talked about how when he was a young man in Chicago, in a tough neighborhood in Chicago in the 1920s, he was targeted because he was Italian, and that he'd be picked up, he'd be roughed up by police on a regular basis, and that was not because they had something against Italians, but it was because at that particular time in our culture and in our history, young Italian men were more, in that particular neighborhood in particular, were more likely to be involved in criminality than in other neighborhoods or other ethnic groups in other neighborhoods. Eventually, this stopped because Italians, became more middle class. They moved out to the suburbs in many cases, or the criminality went away as they became more assimilated into American culture. And there was no longer this epidemic of crime in their neighborhood. The problem here is that there is still this dynamic in predominantly minority neighborhoods where you have more crime, and it is a systemic problem. Uh, the question, of course, comes down to a somewhat of a sociological question, and I study sociology now in college, and that is, what do you do about it? How do you elevate people so that there's more opportunity and thus crime will be reduced, as happened with other ethnic groups? And that's, of course, an interesting question. I think it has a lot to do with, you know, economic programs that actually increase opportunity for people to get into business, to expand business, to develop entrepreneurialism. I think it has to do with strengthening the Black church and faith and belief and the structure around that, which is a social structure, a network of people who help each other and who develop programs for young people and get people involved in programs where they can learn how to, you know, make social contact and be married and, you know, develop friendships and lifelong friendships that could lead to professional advantage as one grows, you know, and developing this kind of a solid web of infrastructure. To my way of thinking, a society can accommodate that and set the stage for that to happen. It's not something that I think can be made to happen, but I would suggest that the best way to develop that is to have a pro-business attitude on the part of government, where government reduces unnecessary regulations that stand in the way of businesses getting into business, making it as easy as possible for people to get into business, to have a dollar that has a solid and stable value. That is a national question. That's a question we can address separately on another time. That's a monetary issue, something that I've studied. I've written a book about this. Um, there is the spiritual component, as I mentioned, the strengthening of the church, the strengthening of religious organizations. There is the education component, putting in place educational modalities that help someone think properly and develop a cognitive ability to function, such as phonics for reading, so that one can properly read and sound out vowels and consonants at a young age. And thus, if you can read and you can read well, that's a huge step toward independence and toward the development of a sovereign person who can then function and control to a very high degree their own life and their own destiny. A lot of that was done away with by left-wing change agents such as John Dewey and others, going all the way back to the 1920s and 30s, but that program really didn't take off finally until the 1950s and 60s. The result has been calamitous, particularly for minority communities. My friend, the late Dr. Sam Blumenfeld, did a survey in an article where he did research and discovered that something like 70 or 80% of Black men incarcerated are virtually illiterate, that they have low literacy skills. And that's because they were not taught to read phonetically in these big public schools. And the public schools did this for social reasons, and very bad ones, I may add. So have our education system put in place modalities that can teach someone how to think on their own. They can understand the basic concepts of the American constitutional system, which you do not have in schools today. They can understand the basic moral code that makes up our Western civilization. And they can learn to apply these things practically. You know, President Trump has talked about increasing the importance also of trade schools and vocational education and taking the stigma away from that that's put in place a lot of times by these sneering, arrogant liberals, taking that away so that people can learn a trade. They, you know, not everyone needs to go to college, for academics. It's just not for everyone. It's not necessary. People, can make a very good living and have a very fulfilled life and become very successful in every sense with a trade as a carpenter or a plumber or electrician or construction. I mean, these jobs pay very well, and you can get into business. We should have a system that encourages that. That's why the way we reduce crime. Have a system that doesn't put people on these national welfare programs that pay women not to have husbands and that pay them more to have more children. That's, you have fatherless households, which is a disaster. There's a good movie that was done about this a few years back called Precious, which I think was very strong in its illustration of the social ills that are associated with that. So these are just some thoughts I have about the broader social question that leads to an increase in violence, particularly in the minority neighborhoods, and the unfortunate and bad reaction by police departments that are secretive and don't weed out their own bad apples because they're involved with a secret society that has a Masonic nature, an association. So I think that that's why it happens that this bad cop was able to continue without any consequences. And also, of course, you have a very bad DA system, district attorney system, where these district attorneys have enormous amount of power, either to prosecute someone who is innocent or not prosecute someone who's guilty. And that seems to have been the case in Minneapolis with Amy Klobuchar, who then goes on to run for president, but who decided that as district attorney of Hennepin County, which is Minneapolis, that she would not prosecute this particular criminal cop, who then went on to murder again. And that shows a real breakdown in our system of law and order and in our system of justice, with people who are dangerous have to be removed from society, and people who are innocent should be left alone and allowed to live their lives, which is, there are too many people in prison right now, particularly African Americans, who are innocent or who are involved with petty crimes, and who are not, putting them in prison is itself criminal. So, that in and of itself only breeds to more crime. So then the result is that we have this terrible crime, and it is a terrible injustice. It does need to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed with practical and good and realistic solutions that can actually lead to change. Instead, and we have people, good people, who are demonstrating their feelings about this by protesting, which is a good thing, which is an American thing. There are good people out there. Most of them are, 90%, 95% of them are good people. But as has happened in the past, and as is more and more happening now, you have the rotten, leftist, George Soros-backed, organized, professional protesters coming in. And by the way, the mayor of Minneapolis, the governor of Minnesota, and other people in Minnesota have stated, and there's a lot of witnesses to it, that people came into Minneapolis from the outside the city, people they'd never seen before, outside the state, even outside the country, to loot and burn predominantly Black businesses. Is that a way to deal with justice for Floyd Brown? To go out and burn Black businesses and destroy Black enterprise? I mean, this is what happened in 1967, where you had cities like Newark and Detroit burned down, and it took a generation before people could once again start to get back on their feet. And they were predominantly Black people who were hurt by this. Is that how you deal with this injustice? I think that the president and our administration and our governors, and apparently President Trump is having a call with governors today, need to identify the nature of the agitators, the outside agitators, the communist agitators, people in, this kind of vague group like Antifa, which is set up almost in the classic way communist parties used to be set up, which is in such a way that one can deny their membership Um, groups like Antifa, Black Lives Matters, which is an anti-police group predominantly. I'm not saying there are some good people in it, well-meaning people, but you have predominantly an anti-cop organization, and you've got George Soros and his leftist shock troops. Lenin in the Soviet times referred to these people as shock troops. That's what they are. They're shock troops. They are there to create problems on the street. And while the people in the boardrooms and the people in positions of power use that activity to further their leftist agendas. There's it's called like the scissors effect. The upper blade comes from the rich, from the corporate, and the lower blade comes from the street, and then they come together to slice and dice and destroy the average lives of working people and citizens. This is an attack on small business, is what this is. This isn't just an attack on Black people. It is that, but it is an attack on ownership, and a lot of these people are open about that. Here in Boston, where I am, I just saw a tweet from Chris Ferrone. I'm going to try to get him on the show. Oh, he's going to a Boston rally. He's never been so excited in his life. He's running around and all his old friends are out and everybody's, oh my God, we're having a great time here. And he's a pretty open communist. And you get all these rotten communist groups who want to use this as an excuse to further overthrow American freedom and American capitalism. Maybe they're realizing that the pandemic is now wearing off. People are getting back to life again. At least, most of us who are reasonable and aren't sitting there shivering and frightened in our corners. And so they need a new thing. I don't know. I'm not one to subscribe conspiracy to this in the terms of the actual event. I've already seen some people who are doing that. Maybe I'll have them on the show. I don't know. We'll see. I do think that this happened, and I think that this was a bad cop who probably is racist and who killed this man in cold blood. I've seen it. It just that's what it looks like to me. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know the exact circumstances, but either way, they are using this as an excuse to loot and burn Black neighborhoods rather than take a look at the society, and rather than pointing fingers of blame at anybody that doesn't goose step to the left as somehow having something against Black people. That's not constructive. We need to take a look at the institutional failures that have caused Black poverty and suffering and address those. And I think I just tried to, pointing out the problems of the infiltration starting in the 1960s of the Black church, of Black entrepreneurialism, Black education, Black neighborhoods, Black business, and Black family. So I guess on that note, I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. I didn't get any visitors, so I'm going to be here again tomorrow. My goal in terms of doing the live program is to do the broadcast every day at 12 noon, and anyone can join it on Zoom. Anyone can call in at the phone number through Skype. That number, I'm going to give it out again, is 339-244-3665, 339-244-3665. The program goes live on several platforms. I'm very excited about that, and I'm looking forward to building a great online experience where we can get together every afternoon at 12 o'clock, discuss issues, bring in guests, and really just have a great time examining the world that we live in a way that is free and is open. I understand there's the whole business about censorship from various outlets, which is why I'm trying to expand the program to include many, many venues and many platforms, so that if I'm taken off one, I will be on another. And we will build through critical mass this great online community that convenes every day and that really just hangs out and talks about everything. Anyways, on that note, I want to thank you for joining me. This is Charles Moscowitz. Check out my books. They're available at Amazon Books. Just put my name in the server, Charles Moscowitz. That's like it's phonetic, Moscowitz. And you will find all of my books. I've written about 15 books. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. The more I can build that channel, the more I can get things done in terms of building the show. So anyway, on that note, thanks for joining me on this maiden show. I shall return tomorrow, 12 noon, right here at this same venue on which you are listening and watching. And I shall continue, God willing, to do this program every single day, Monday through Friday, from 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much, everybody, and be safe and have a great afternoon.